Thank you and welcome for coming to today's Atticus Advantage Growth Essentials webinar, Hiring in the Midst of a Pandemic, Recruiting and Training Strategies for Law Firm Owners. I'm Mike Wells. I'm the organizer in the background. I'd like to welcome our presenter today, Mark Powers. He is the president of Atticus. Mark has coached attorneys for nearly 30 years, and his passion is really helping you focus on what's important in your life. And as the founder of Atticus, he really developed the first personalized training program for educating law firm owners. Mark, thank you so much for leading today's discussion. This is a really important topic to a lot of law firm owners out there today. I'm going to go ahead and let you just get started.
Thanks, Mike. Also, just to mention to everyone, at Atticus, and anyone that's familiar with Atticus, we usually focus on those things in your law firms, at least the fundamentals at first: time management, marketing, building a great team, and cash flow. So we wrote a book a number of years ago called Hire Slow, Fire Fast, which is going to tie into everything we're talking about. And we wrote that book because of the attorneys that came to Atticus. They would say, across the board, one of the top frustrations they had, every law firm had, was with either I brought on a client that I shouldn't have brought on, or I brought on a staff member I shouldn't have. And so it made some hiring problems. So no one ever really gave you the tools, showed you how to find, recruit, hire, train, and retain great talent. Most of us in law firms were reduced to gut reactions around that. So it's why we wrote the book, and also why we brought on Susan Schmidt to Atticus. Susan is the really chief recruiting specialist at Atticus, and she does that for law firms. So I brought Susan on because she's been doing this for enough law firms that I want to make sure we interview her so that you can get what she's done, why it works, and how you can do it yourself if you choose to. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Mark. It's nice to be here.
So for some of you may not be familiar with Atticus. I know some of you are, some of you aren't. Let me just give you a quick update. And I'll start by talking about you first. So if you're like most solo and small firm attorneys, owners, what you really want is more free time in your life. You want less stress. You want better clients. You want to increase your income. And you want a great team around you. So really, this is what Atticus does. Our programs, our workshops, our webinars are all designed, at the very least, to increase revenues, reduce stress, and provide balance in your life. Ultimately, our job is to give you the practice that you love walking in the door today more than you did the day before. And if you don't have a practice that's doing that, this is why people need to come to Atticus. So we're about to go through this webinar, and we want you to participate. I'm going to make it as interactive as possible. So keep a pencil, paper handy, take lots of notes, and you may not be able to unmute on this webinar, but there's a chat function off to the right. So ask questions along the way. It's fine. You can stop Susan or I anywhere along the way to talk about anything you want. Plus, I'm going to ask you to post some of your thoughts in the chat box from time to time. So we have three goals today. I know we're going to talk about finding, recruiting, hiring great talent, but I also want to talk about assessing your current talent and see if any of the needs have changed during the pandemic. And we'll talk a little bit about what's changed, what hasn't changed, and where you are with your current team. And then we're going to be interviewing Susan for her top strategies, tips, practical ideas that she does for recruiting and finding talent. And then if there's any way we can help you in your practice, we can talk about that and let you know as well. So here we go. So what has changed around staff with the pandemic? And I'm asking that not as a rhetorical question. I'd like you to write down at least one thing for you that's changed around the area of staff or staffing during the pandemic. Go ahead and write something down, please. If you've got it written down, Mike, I'm going to ask people to post it in the chat box. So I'd like you to post in the chat box what you have seen change around staff with the pandemic. And while you're posting that, I'll talk a little bit of the things that we've seen that's changed. One of the things that's changed is your team has been working from home for at least 6 months now, and they're becoming accustomed to it. They're understanding the technology better, whether it's the Zoom technology, it's the virtual connections that allow them to operate remotely, and it's even, for some of your firms, even paperless. So the technology is getting better, your use of it's getting better. I'm going to say that some of the positions in the firm today have become questionable. Some of them may even be obsolete by now. And it's really a good time to take a look at what we have to do around our current team. I tend to think when I work with a law firm, I tend to think of it like we're committed to a championship. We're committed to a great firm. We're committed to excellence, and we're building a team. And every once in a while, you got to take a look at that team and see if everybody's in the right place and make some changes if you have to. And then for a lot of you, the brick and mortar office space is coming into question. Also past geographical restrictions, the geographical restrictions for hiring people has changed. It's now more of an opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit about that on this call. But some of you live in markets that are tight markets, and it's hard to find people. And if you're willing to open up a little bit, there's more opportunity for finding people. What hasn't changed, quite frankly, employees that were an issue before the pandemic are still an issue. Now they just have an excuse when they're working from home. And the truth is that what else hasn't changed is great employees are still great employees. You have some tolerations that you had before the pandemic, and they're still there, especially around your team. And the process for hiring great talent is basically the same. That hasn't changed. And we'll go through that process. Listen, what's changed in that, if anything, is now you can interview people through Zoom, but the process is going to be basically the same. And what hasn't changed, and this is going to surprise some of you, I think, is the employment market is still very competitive. So listen, we're running at about 7.9% unemployment right now. And maybe that will go up, maybe it'll go down, we'll see. And a lot of us expected, wow, this should make a lot of opportunity out in the marketplace. The truth is, at least what we've found as we've been searching for you and trying to find talent for you, hasn't worked out that way. It seems to be very, very competitive in the legal profession. What talent we are sometimes finding is excess of people that are not a right fit for your firm. Would you say that's true, Susan?
That's absolutely true, Mark.
So there's a book called Good to Great. And I imagine if you're familiar with Atticus, we would have recommended this book to you from time to time. And Jim Collins is the author of that. And he likes to talk about he uses the metaphor of a bus. And he says, our job as owners of the firm is to get the right people on the bus in the right seats and get those people that are not a good fit off the bus. And it's nothing personal to these people. We're not trying, listen, when I say we'll get people off the bus that aren't a good fit, we're not just firing them right off the bat, but we need to find a way to transition them out of the firm. And the thing that you want to understand, it's very helpful to understand, is that yours isn't the only bus out there. So if someone can't work for you, there are other buses to go on besides your firm. Ultimately, you want to get the right people on the bus in the right seats. This will change your life. This will change your firm. This will change every outcome in your firm when you do this well. So we're going to do something that's, for some of you, I think will be a difficult conversation. We're going to assess your current team. So you're doing this privately, I hope. No one's looking over your shoulder. But we're going to ask the question, do we have the right people on the bus in the firm? We're going to check and see who's questionable or on the fence and how do we deal with it. And are we weak in a particular area? If we're building an extraordinary firm, and some of you are having record years, even with the COVID-19 shutdown, you're having a great year, and it's not, you're trying to add talent. And so maybe there's a particular area you need to do that. So I'm going to run you through an exercise, and it's going to start with having you list out each player on your team. And I want you to ask these 6 questions. So I'm going to go through 6 questions, but you're going to start by making a list. Now, listen, if you have over 15 people in your firm, I want you to limit to a team close to you or within your management control. I don't want, if you have 30 people in the firm, I don't want you to list out 30 people right now. I want you to take a team, or if you're under 15, list as all of them. So take a minute to do that. This is a valuable exercise. It's interactive. If you want to get the most power out of it, go through this exercise. When you're done, if you don't like it, crumble it up, throw away. But go through the exercise. So list out each player on your team, up to 15 players. If you like, and you've got the names there, put 6 columns beside it, because they're going to ask you 6 questions, and you can answer for each person. I'll give you another 30 seconds to finish out listing. Okay, good. So we're going to give yourself enough room because I'm going to ask you 6 questions and you want to put an answer beside every person. Put this in context again, Susan, for everyone. I want everyone to know that we're looking at this like you're building a great team that's going to take you to the championship, a great team that's going to build an extraordinary law firm, a great team that's consistent with excellence and the standards and the quality of the firm that you want to build, and one that you love. So here's the first question. If I knew then what I know now about this person, would have I still hired them? And the answer beside that is either going to be absolutely yes, and you can say just yes, but we know it's absolutely yes. Probably, not sure, probably. And no, not a chance in the world. If I really knew the things I know now, this person wouldn't have been on my team. So go ahead and answer that question. Mike, while they're answering that question, people can't unmute, correct? We can't do that, right?
I can unmute people individually for you.
Okay. Mike, scan that, and if you can, send a chat. If you could get me 3 people to unmute along the way, they can be representative of the community.
Sure.
And at least we can dialogue and we can post things in the chat. So we should have this one.
People post in some comments to your questions earlier. People are saying that most of their staff are working remotely. They're moving toward more virtual practice. They have more of a need for virtual assistance. They have some initial anxiety about the stability of employment and rotating new employees into new roles that deal with the demands. And some staff that still need their hands held and don't have time to do that for them.
Yeah. Very good. So if you could pick 3, then we'll get to 3, because really what we're going to be talking about, everyone on this call, we're looking at your current team. We know that there's a need to hire. We're going to talk about that and some things that can reduce your stress around hiring. So that's the first question. The second question, here it comes. What are the top 3 frustrations I have with this player? For each player, I want you to answer this. And possible frustrations could be their grooming, could be their parents showing up late, disrupts office, doesn't delegate, isn't productive in the home office, attitude, they don't follow up. What's the frustration you have about this particular employee, this player? Go ahead and write it down for each of them. If you finish writing them down in the chat box, go ahead and drop in like your top frustration. Now, Mike, just as out of curiosity, I don't see the chat box. Am I allowed to see it?
I'll make an organizer mark and then you'll be able to see that. One moment.
It won't change anything, Mike?
No, as long as you don't touch any special buttons.
Okay, good. So, gang, thank you, Mike. I can see that now. I'd like you to post in your frustrations that you're noticing. Go ahead and post them in, the top frustration that you're seeing. Now, what you're going to notice on your list, if you look at your list and you've got your list of players, quite frankly, your star players aren't going to have many frustrations next to them, right? Maybe you have one around them, but mostly your star players don't have any frustrations. And if you start to see a number of your players have big frustrations, out of this conversation, you're going to have to figure out there's going to be some actions to start dealing with those frustrations around that person, or it's going to start pointing more and more as we go through this conversation. You're going to see there are players on your team that are not the right fit, and we're going to have to make a decision around them. I know this is scary for a lot of you and not why you came to this webinar, but some of you are going to see that. The next question, is this person a red, yellow, or green light player? So what's a red light player? A red light player is someone that you delegate tasks to, you delegate activities to, and they have a lot of problems getting them done. They constantly need follow through. They tend to push the activities back up. They delegate back to someone, to you or somebody else. They, across the board, there may be a few things they're good at that are activities they can do well, but there are a lot of activities they just need a lot of follow-up, and they have to be constantly looked at and talked to get the work done. Then there's a yellow light player. A yellow light player has sort of a mixed bag, right? There's things that they can do brilliantly, but there's a number of things that they complete, but the work product is not great. They might complete it on time. They may not need a lot of follow-up, but on that, some of the substantive work you get them, they just don't do it your way. They don't meet your expectations. They don't meet the firm's standards, but they're okay. Then the green light player is pretty obvious, right? And I just want you to write beside each person, green, yellow, or red. The yellow green light player is a person that they've got the right motivation. They take the work, they get it done, they look for additional work. These are people you want to look at to expand their roles. Now, to be fair, some of these players might have activities that are red light. For example, you could have somebody that's great behind the stage doing substantive work, But if you put them out into client contact where they had to do a lot of conversations like a receptionist has to do, they'd go nuts and they wouldn't do good with it. So you'll have a little bit of that. But ultimately, you're looking to see if someone's more green light, yellow light, or red light. Again, the whole purpose of these questions is start to assess your team and get real about this. Now, the next question. You should have red, yellow, green on each player. And then the next question, have we adopted this particular employee? And it's either a yes or a no. And you'll notice that someone's adopted if you or other team members withhold crucial, constructive criticism to help them be a better player because you're afraid of hurting their feelings. And you resist giving feedback to them because they're either going to be defensive or you don't want to hurt their feelings. If that's so, you may have started to adopt this person, if not fully adopted. So if this is a person you've looked at in the earlier questions and they're yellow light, they've got activities that need to be worked on, they're people that you have frustrations with and you don't feel comfortable talking to them about it, they're probably adopted. And the cost of this is that firms who adopt when they keep people around like this, they tend to have a lot of likable underperformers, which is tricky. So note on each of those players, yes or no, adopted, yes, no. Okay, do you have that? Next item. Next question. Is this person passionate about the work they're doing or passionate about the firm? Listen, a lot of times when it comes to your team, it's not so much always what they're doing, it's who's doing it, their character, their drive, their motivation. And on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being highly passionate, give them a score. 1 to 3 is very low. There's not a lot of passion. 4 to 6 is, yeah, some days not. And 7 to 10, listen, this person loves this work. They love this firm. They love our clients. They were built for this. They were made for it. So ultimately, we need to surround ourselves with 7 to 10s. It's one of the things that's going to make a big, big jump for the firm. So give them a score, 1 to 3, 4 to 7, or notice, it's going to be 1 to 10, but notice, are they a 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10? Where do they land? And then the last question, if this person is on the fence for you, meaning that you can't tell if they're a great player or a terrible player, they're just in the middle, can they be salvaged? So we'll say the D players can't be salvaged, right? We're not going to try to salvage them. Ultimately, we need to make room for great players and we have to find an exit strategy for them. But there's C level and maybe B level players that can either be developed and salvaged. We can put them on an improvement plan and they have a chance of coming up in the firm and performing better. So if they're a B or C level player, I'm not asking about D. D is somebody that you answered all the way along the right line that you know this person shouldn't be on the bus. Can they be salvaged? And would remind you of the 3 C's. And anyone, any of you that have been around Atticus probably know what the 3 C's are. Character, competency, and chemistry. So when you're looking at, when we talk about hiring people, or when we're talking about the people on your team, we like to think about the 3 C's because you can develop competency. I can get substantive competency. I I can help someone be a better fit and get them chemistry over time. The truth about it is, once I recognize a character flaw, there's little I can do about that. And so you'll notice that you rarely fire anyone because of what they're doing. It's more about who they're being. It's their character, how committed they are to doing good work, whether they follow up on the work, why they pay attention to it, whether they care about the clients. And those often are character issues. So when you're looking at your current team or you're looking at the team you're building, character becomes a critical issue. And it's their behaviors, whether they can align on your core values. Are they motivated? Are they ethical? Do they keep their word? Do they not gossip? Is their character drama organized around drama? So there's a book we recommend to our clients called No Ego. And it's really designed to, by Cy Wakeman, C-Y, and then Wakeman. And it's really designed to drive the drama out of the firm. So once you fill this out and you're looking at that piece of paper, it should be able to give you some insights and observations. It's either I've got a great team, I've got some players that I can work on, or listen, I got a lot of work to do on this team, or when I notice it's a good team, but there are places I need to fill. We're growing and I need to add people to it. Mike, is there anybody that we can unmute?
Yes, Ed Kanan. I'm going to unmute you now, Ed. You can speak now.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Ed, you're my favorite victim on these calls. Is there anyone else too to support Ed? And by the way, this is tricky because I don't know if we have staff listening to these, and I hope not. But Ed, why Mike's finding if there's someone else to unmute, I'm curious. When you went through that exercise, what did you notice?
You know, I like the people that are on my bus. I have minor criticisms, but nothing dramatic. There's nobody that I feel like is not here for the right reason or on the bus for the right reason.
Yeah, so when you look at it, and I love doing this exercise because you're going to see something like you're seeing, Ed, right? Or which validates the things you're doing. And I know that you're a person that does a lot of these things well. Or it says, listen, I'm trying my best and I still have issues here to work on. So for you, there's some cleanup to do on some players. There's some improvement that can be done. But overall, you're pretty happy with the team.
Yeah, I like my team. The people that are on it were selected for a reason. There's nobody that is on the bus right now that was a crisis hire. You know, they were all deliberative hires at the right time for the right reason, and those are the folks that have survived.
Good. Mike, and you can hang out because along the way we can ask questions, and Ed and others can be representatives of the group. Is there anyone else?
I've sent out a few chat messages to folks, so check your chat dashboard if you see a question from me about calling upon you to speak. We haven't had any other volunteers, but if you'd like to, you can just raise your hand icon and we'll choose you.
Okay, good. Ed, thank you for that. So I want everyone to write their observations, their insights down. And I'm going to ask you to post them. Again, it's valuable. It's valuable for you to talk about this and just get your observations out there because it starts to move you into action. So there's some actions, and I'd like you all to write down 3 actions you need to take out of this conversation. So there's an employee that I absolutely need to let go of before the end of the year. There's an employee that I need to put on an improvement plan in the next 30 days. There's an employee that I need to reward and acknowledge this year for their extraordinary contribution. We are at full capacity, even though we're working remotely during the pandemic, and we need to add people. I've got a great team like Ed, and I need to add people. And I know what that position is. So go ahead and write down your 3 actions. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about finding new talent. So you've assessed your team, you have a good idea of what you need, and we're going to talk about assessing them. So, and now I'm going to talk more with Susan because this is the work she does. She does this day in, day out for law firms. And Susan, this is usually the process that at least when we write the book and when we coach people, that they have to decide on the level of staff that they need. Because sometimes they think they need another attorney, when in fact, their attorney that they're working with is doing a lot of paralegal level work, not delegating. And what they really need is another paralegal, and teach that attorney to let go of the paralegal level work so that he or she can do her highest and best work. So there's some work to understand the type of person that they need. Then we go about the recruiting process, which is hiring. All of us have to review resumes. The people have to be interviewed and tested. The Atticus process is very big on assessment tests, which we'll talk about. And then we have to orient them and bring them on board. So from a systems perspective, this is the process you want to do when you're finding new talent. And doing that work up front is the most important. Susan, so you do this on a regular basis. Can you talk a little bit about this when you're helping a firm identify the person they're looking for? So again, everyone, so you know, Susan works with law firms to help them recruit and interview and do the resume screening. I'll talk a little bit about what she does in a little bit, but can you talk about how you get them ready for that?
Sure, Mark. Most of the time when the attorneys come to me, they've been working maybe with an Atticus coach, they've identified the need, and they know what they're looking for. But there are times, I had a call recently with a firm that they weren't sure if they were going to have a receptionist or administrative assistant. They'd been hiring as an administrative assistant, but unfortunately the people weren't staying. So I delved a little bit deeper with her to find out what the duties were of the job. And I made the suggestion that they would probably want to advertise it as a receptionist position rather than administrative, because if you're hiring higher than what the position is for, that person's going to get bored and they're going to leave quickly. So
Yeah.
there are times that, yes.
So that's so great, Susan. For everyone here, this becomes the most critical step. Really determining the type of person that you're looking for. Again, is it a receptionist, administrative person, a paralegal, legal secretary? Is it an attorney? What level attorney? Also, we always like to look and see if there's somebody on the team that could step up and do that. We love promoting from within when possible. When hiring outside, we're looking for the lowest level of competency needed. So that's a little tricky for some people. But as Susan just in that example said, listen, they wanted an administrative assistant, and the lowest level of competency in that organization they needed was the receptionist, which is often the most important hire. And that's what they had to hire for. And then that person could do other things. So make sure you're searching that. And then you have to decide what's the education level. Is an attorney that's 2 years out of school, 3 years, 5, 7, 10 years doing work, and the level of skill that's needed, because we're going to test all of that. And again, we like to remember the 3 bucket theory. So when you're looking for people, you're either looking for a full bucket, a half full bucket, and an empty bucket. So what does that mean? Full bucket means I'm looking for someone that has got been doing this for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, fully experienced. They could step into this position with no problem. Or I'm looking for somebody not quite, I don't need them to be that deep, that experienced, that expensive. I'm looking for a half full bucket. Or I'm looking for someone right out of school or starting the position. They've got all the qualities I need. all the character qualities I need, the chemistry I need. I can teach them the competency. So the question that you all have to ask is, which one of these do I hire? When I go looking, what am I looking for, and which one of these do I hire? And I think most of you probably know the answer is it depends. So if your firm is running full out, you're at full capacity, everyone's working at their max, you need to hire somebody that's a full bucket. Somebody that can come in, step into the job, and start right away doing great work. If you don't do that, and you get a half bucket or an empty bucket, then your great team gets overloaded because they're already maxed out. Now they got to train a new person. And if that doesn't work out, they have to do more and more and more, and they're just extending themselves. The work product gets dropped, their morale gets dropped. So it's worth the money. And as long as you're doing leveraging, and I'll put a plug in, we're launching our cash flow book, the 4th Cornerstone book this quarter. It'd be a good book to read on understanding the leveraging of your great team. A more expensive full bucket can generate more revenue and profit under those circumstances. Now, listen, if I've got a really, like I know Ed, if I've got a really good operating firm and everybody's operating at their profitable capacity, I can afford to hire a half full bucket or an empty bucket and train them into our culture a little better. But you've got to have that luxury, and you should be running really well to do that. Susan, is there anything you want to say about that?
Yes, Mark, and sometimes the firms think they want to hire an empty bucket, but they're not really prepared to take time to train that person, and it's just going to end up with frustration all the way around, and you're setting the person up for failure right as they're starting.
Yeah, so again, this depends. Think about it before you do it. But let's say you know, listen, Mark, I know what we're looking for. Susan, I know what I'm looking for. And where do I find them? So you've got a number of options. There's the option of you can do it yourself. You can start advertising. You can put in social media. You get the definitions, and then you get all of the resumes in. You review the resumes, screen them. And by the way, I mean that you can do this yourself, and many of you have an Atticus coach. They can coach you on how to do it. You've got a book that walks you exactly how to do it. But sometimes you don't have the time, the energy, or the patience to do it. So you might use a recruiter or a headhunter. Now that's a viable option, and we have referrals to recruiters and headhunters, but usually it's on higher level people that you're having trouble finding, and you need them to seek them out of other firms sometimes. The difficulty, the downside of the recruiter is what? It's going to cost you 25 to 30% of the salary to get that headhunter to do them. So if I'm hiring a $100,000 person, I'm going to spend 25 grand to find that person. Now listen, sometimes that's worth it for important positions. My other option I have is a temporary placement service. I'm a fan of these. They're placement services, and they deal with legal. There's placement services, not always in your market, but a lot of markets that will pull in paralegals or administrative, usually not attorneys. But they'll do all of the recruiting and the resume review and all of that. They'll put them in the office. If you like them, you keep them. If you don't, you send them back and they put somebody else in. It is a viable method, but you still have a pretty good expense. It's probably 15 to 20% of the salary paid out over time when you do that. So that's an option. If you're going to do it yourself, you'll advertise. And Susan, what do you recommend people advertise in? Where are the places they should advertise?
For the majority of the time, Mark, I place ads on Indeed for firms. They're highly publicized. They usually get a lot of responses. And believe it or not, Craigslist sometimes is still viable. I was working with a firm here in Florida, an estate planning firm. they were looking for a paralegal. We weren't getting that many responses, qualified people on Indeed. So we placed an ad on Craigslist, and believe it or not, we found 2 very qualified paralegals, and rather than hiring one, he's hired them both. So that's also an option.
Good. And so you'll put it in social media, LinkedIn, your Facebook ads. It's good to do that. I'm a big fan of that 4th bullet item, is putting a bounty out there. So we engage our staff and our personal network to say, listen, this is the qualifications, the type of person, you know our culture. If you find the person, we'll pay $1,000. Now listen, you could do 500, you could do 1,000, you could do 2,000, depending on the market. But we'll give $1,000 as an example, 500 when we hire them, and 500 when we've kept them for 90 days. And I love those bounties because they usually, especially if it's your staff, they won't find any jerks. They'll only find people they would like to work with. So all of those are options. And then for some of you, you'll just say, listen, I love all of that. I just don't want a recruiter. I don't want to do the temp service. Can you do all of this for me? And that's where Build My Great Team came in, right? We had this request from clients for a long time. We've shown them, we've talked to them, we've written the books on it, but sometimes they say, just do it for me. And Susan, that's the team you lead. Can you talk about what you do when someone says, do it for me, Build My Great Team?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when we have an inquiry and we have someone who wants us to work with them, I have an initial consult with the attorney, maybe the several attorneys, the firm administrator, whoever the hiring person is, to find out about the position that they're looking to fill. I'll ask questions about the firm, the environment, the culture there, so that we can draft an ad that reflects the firm and it'll draw in people that will fit into that culture. I'll draft an ad and send it over for review, and then once the ad is finalized, we post it on Indeed. And if the firm does not have an Indeed account, we'll start the account for you, and then from that point, we just take it from there. We'll review resumes as they come in to see if they meet the criteria that's been specified. Once we have some resumes that we feel do meet this criteria, we'll send them over for review. And then once the firm has reviewed them, they may pick 1, 2, 3, however many candidates that they'd like us to conduct phone interviews for. So at that point, then we go back, we schedule the phone interview with the candidates. I have had an attorney or two ask me if I do Zoom interviews, to which I reply, no, I want to do a phone interview because I want to hear how this person sounds when someone is calling your firm. So we'll conduct a phone interview. We ask questions. I have a list of questions, but I always ask if the firm has questions they would like us to ask as well. We use a situation that the person may encounter in the office to see how the candidate responds. And at the end of the phone interview, I have a notes section. So I'll put across my first impressions of this person. If they spoke well, if they had an accent of any kind, if they had an energy to their voice, if they had a smile in their voice, just whatever impressions. And I also tend to pick up if people use a certain word or phrase a lot, especially like, and I'll make note of that as well. And then those notes are sent over to the firm for their follow-up if they want to do an interview with the person. So that's essentially what we're doing, Mark, in a nutshell.
Yeah, so you'll run the whole process from the job description to the advertising to the reviewing the resumes to getting the candidates set up, pre-interviewed, to setting interviews for the firm, and in some cases even testing, yes?
With the Indeed ad, you can place the ad and request each candidate who applies, especially for staffing positions, to complete one of the Indeed skill assessments. Now, Indeed includes a lot of assessments that you can choose from. I typically use the attention to detail. And then you'll receive the score from the Indeed assessment, and they'll rate it from completed to familiar, proficient, highly proficient, and expert. And this also will tell you if the person is really interested in the position, if they take that extra step to complete the assessment. Now,
I'm sorry.
Now, for in-person interviews, though, there are tests that Atticus has included in the Hire Slow, Fire Fast book, and I also have those forms in Word and PDF so that I can forward them to the hiring firm that they can have those tests completed in person.
Okay, I'll talk about some of those. So, and Susan, if someone used that service, what's the range of the fee for doing the Building My Great Team? If you did all that for them, what's their fee range?
All right. Now we have several packages, Mark, and they range from around $1,000 to up around $2,000. And most firms are going with the middle package for about $1,500.
Okay, good. So it's the reason that was created is because our Atticus community was asking for it, and we like everything else, we keep it as affordable as possible. So it's a great service for those of you ready, and I'll give you an email for Susan or a way to get it if you want to use that. And if you need references for recruiters, we can get that for you. So if you are doing it yourself, you're going to ask for and review cover letters. They're trickier to get, right, Susan? Not as easy to get the cover letters these days?
Absolutely. And every ad we place, we ask for a cover letter. And I'm going to guess about 90% of them will not provide a cover letter. I think a lot of them are applying on handheld devices, and they're just not taking the time to put the cover letter in. And if those who do send the cover letter, of course, they're a step ahead of the rest of the candidates.
Okay. And so we're checking for spelling, grammatical errors, especially in their resume, because why? This is their best. Go ahead, Susan.
Right. This is their best effort. If they can't put forth the effort for themselves, are they going to put forth the effort for the firm?
And so we're looking for, listen, it doesn't nix anyone, but we're looking for job changes, gaps in employment. There's lots of reasons for those. So we don't throw them out of the pile, but you're making a yes, no, and maybe pile. That's it. Your first screening of the resumes is yes, no, maybe. And these are people we're going to go forward looking at. By the way, if you're doing this yourself, it's probably, when you're doing this process, you can delegate this process internally, but it's probably 6 to 8 hours of doing this on an individual hire to get it right. Is that about right, Susan?
Yes, that's about right, Mark.
So we'll talk about interviewing and testing candidates. So we're a big fan. Listen, you should get it. The book is called Hire Slow, Fire Fast. Hire Slow means that. This is such a critical thing for you. We have to be methodical. We have to be ruthless in following the process. So we do assessment tests, as Susan talked about. We assess their grammar, spelling, punctuation, attention to detail. Why? Listen, your firm, if it's nothing, you have to have those things right. Otherwise, it's embarrassing out there. We do behavioral, situational interviews. We're not asking yes, no. And in some cases, you're going to do background checks. In some cases, you're going to do background checks. I'm sorry. So we talked about these testing for grammar, filing, spelling, that you can get them on some of the services. They're in the book. And if you're using Susan, she'll send you them. We usually, once we get the candidates closer to where we're going to hire, we do a behavioral profile. We happen to use the DISC profile. There's others out there. We like it because it's fairly simple. And we're looking at, listen, if I'm hiring someone as a receptionist and they are an introvert, it's not going to work. Or if I'm hiring someone backstage and they're an extrovert, I've got to be careful. So it will tell you, it give you a good hint if this person is looking for stability, if they're conscientious. So it's a very good test to do, assessment to do. And often during the hiring process, we like them to fill out a document. Again, interviewing, I would always have, when you're doing the final interview, have more than one person there. It's good to have a selection committee, especially with Zoom. It's so easy to do. You don't have to go through their whole resume with them unless you have unanswered questions. Focus on behavioral, situational questions, open-ended questions. So write these down. There's some simple ones. But Susan, I'm going to I'm going to go through these questions on getting them through the hiring. I think everybody has the basics here. And then we'll do a takeaway, and then I'll open up for questions. So we have some time for questions.
Okay.
So these are, listen, when you get them to the door in the office and you're interviewing them, open-ended. What would the person who likes you the most at your current or last job say your worst quality is? And what would the person who likes you the best say is your best quality? How do you organize your day to be successful? Why do we want to know that? We want to know how they manage tasks, how they think about their day. How do you do when you have to adjust that plan, or you have to handle multiple tasks at one time? So Susan, when you do this, you have a list of questions to provide people, yes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so listen, we've talked about a lot of things here, assessing your current team. We've talked about these things. I'm going to go to questions and answers, which usually brings up some good stuff. And you'll be able to either unmute, raise your hand, or you will be able to put it in the chat box or the question box, and Mike will read it for you. But right now, what I'd like you to do is write down what your biggest takeaway from this conversation is. And Ed, while people are writing that down, and you're the only soul I have unmuted right now, what was your biggest takeaway out of this conversation?
Sorry, I was waiting for Mike to unmute me. But my biggest takeaway, I mean, look, I have to have some conversations with my team, because I think when I was going through the exercise, there are a couple of things that came up that I said, you know, I might want to mention this, so it's probably worth having those conversations. But otherwise, like I said, I like my team. As for the flip side, on the hiring side, I can tell you, having, you know, worked with Susan on hiring, you know, the amount of time it saves, when I just looked at what I was paying the people on my team to actually do this, or what my investment of time was on stuff that I just didn't need to be involved in at the front end, the cost was de minimis. And so it was a no-brainer to get Susan involved in those kind of things. And so I don't know how long I've been doing this, Susan. What is it, 3 years, 4 years?
At least, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's worthwhile. There's no question about that.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because I have to usually in small firms, you're going to take your paralegals or some administrative people to start to work on this, and they should be working on files. And you don't need to spend a lot of time on this either, other than getting the last candidates, making sure you're getting good candidates. Thanks, Ed. So listen, a couple of recommendations. I would do what Ed's doing, is look at that assessment, and there may be, listen, there's time to have a crucial conversation with some players. There's really, some of the most important things you'll do this year is start cleaning up your team. And that sounds terrible when I say it that way, but truthfully, you're committed to an extraordinary law firm, taking extraordinary care of people, loving your law firm. You cannot have people on your team that don't love what you're doing and are competent at doing it. It brings everybody down, and it seems like we're just doing this for the heck of it. It's a little bit of, I don't know, it starts to broach on mediocrity, and that's not what you're committed to. So one recommendation is do that. If you're hiring, listen, I would go, and quite frankly, we built this for a reason, go to Build My Great Team. I think there's, Mike, you put a URL here. And Mike, if you could drop that into the chat box for people, along with Susan's email. So if you click on that one Mike is putting in the chat box, or if you go to the Atticus website and you click on what we do, you'll see Build My Great Team there. And you can look at the various packages, or you can just email Susan directly. So that's an option, and I highly recommend it. It's incredibly valuable. And Susan's going to develop the job description, run advertisements, screen applicants, schedule appointments, assess and test candidates, complete background checks someplace. But we're not doing that right now, right, Susan?
No, we're not.
Okay,
No.
and that might be another one. And eventually, I shouldn't have those clicked because Atticus will be adding background checks and will be adding train and certify team members to build my great team. I should uncheck those, Mike, in the future. Questions? Mike put that in there, so you have that. Listen, if this isn't where you are right now, or you're saying, I've got deeper issues, you may want to do something called a practice growth diagnostic. I am a big fan of taking a look at your firm, seeing where you are, what needs to be looked at. They're going to do a DISC behavioral profile. They're going to assess your practice, look at all of the foundations, time management, marketing, staffing, cash flow. Going to do a growth analysis, and they'll give you 3 of the most impactful actions that you could take out of that conversation. If you want to do one, the investment's not too much. It's $295, and you can, it takes an hour to do after you fill out the diagnostics. Very, very valuable. And you could go to the Atticus website, and there's a button that says, how do I get started? And that will send you to a diagnostic request, and that's Atticus Advantage. By the way, if you're new to Atticus and you decide to do a diagnostic, if you complete it within the next 2 weeks, we'll give you a Hire, Slow, Fire, Fast book, which is, that alone is $700. It's $79.95. It's an $80 book, really. So if you decide to do that in the next 2 weeks, make sure Mike knows you were on, or someone knows you were on this webinar. We'll send you that book. So Mike, I'm going to go to questions. And we said you can put it in the chat box, or you could ask your question on the board.
Yes,
And
if you have a
Mike,
question, you can raise your hand icon, or you can put it into the chat box. We don't have any questions typed in currently, Mark.
Yeah, Mike, I do see someone asking about they may need a virtual assistant instead of an in-office assistant. Again, I would email Susan Schmidt for that. She is connected to a lot of virtual assistants. We use a lot of them. She works with a lot of them, and she has lots of referrals for virtual assistants. Mike, I'll wait another minute if we don't see anything, and I'll ask Susan a question. And then if everybody's ready, we'll complete. Susan, if you had one suggestion for people other than work in my great team, what's the most important thing people need to do when they think of hiring, recruiting right now in a pandemic?
Well, you want to allow plenty of time. We're finding that although the employment rate is what it is difficult to find good people, and it doesn't seem to matter what area of the country it is. So you want to allow yourself plenty of time, and then when you do post the ad, you want to respond quickly to those candidates who are qualified and they're responding to you, because they are going to get snatched up quickly. So that would be my top tips there, Mark.
Okay. So, Mike, I'll just check one more time. Any questions?
No, we have not had any questions in.
Okay. Listen, Susan, great job. Mike, excellent. Thanks for walking us through this. Ed, I always appreciate you being there and jumping on, because you're always such a great contributor. You get to be the voice of the Atticus community often. It's just a delight to see you when I'm on one of these programs. All right, everyone. If you have any questions, you can go to grow@atticusadvantage.com, Susan Schmidt at atticusadvantage.com, and we hope to see you soon. Be safe, everyone.